And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor for Assignment at the Western Journal. Joining me here today, two of my team members, Joey Chester, Assignment Editor, and Tara Snyder, also an Assignment Editor. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to bring you up to date on the latest that we have got regarding actually a couple of issues that maybe don't directly link to each other at first, but I think we're going to be able to link them. I want to start out talking about the Freedom Convoy, the People's Convoy. So unless you've been living under a rock for the last few weeks, you know what has happened in Canada. A number of truckers essentially took Ottawa and parked there and sort of strangled the city. And I don't mean that with the negative connotation. It sounds like the city sort of needs to be strangled.
Yes.
And in fact, I think in any sort of combat terms, they won the city because Justin Trudeau retreated and left the city to the truckers, making two excuses, not just one, COVID and his own safety concerns. Now Americans have, in a weird reversal that should terrify every American out there, Americans are taking a cue from Canadians. And we're forming our own People's Convoy. And that convoy will start in California and wind its way through the United States and end up in Washington, D.C., near the State of the Union address, near the time for the State of the Union address. In fact, I think we've got the route there that we can put up on the screen, perhaps. Yeah, there it is. So you can see it's going to start in California, a little bit north, about 50 miles north of L.A., and then it is going to wind its way across the country. And there are conflicting reports here. Some people are saying they're going to get there about March the 5th. We know the State of the Union is on March the 1st. There was some chatter about they're trying to get there by the 1st. And also people speculating what in the heck would happen if truckers take over the Beltway in the middle of the State of the Union. Will they have the State of the Union? Will they have it there? Will they go somewhere else? What will they do? I'm sure Trump would host it at Mar-a-Lago without a problem. He would offer his venue. So I want to give you just a few details that Reuters was reporting on this, and then we want to discuss a little bit. 24 18-wheeler trucks, along with some 50 pickup trucks and RVs, left Adelanto, California. That's about 80 miles northeast of Los Angeles. By the way, thank you, Reuters. They also tell us that's 130 kilometers north of Los Angeles.
We're not
we really
Canadians
needed to know that. Beginning an 11-day, an 11-day trek to the Beltway. This is for our freedoms, our human rights. Enough is enough, said Ron Coleman, 61, a trucker from Reno, Nevada. Is he prepared to make the 2,500-mile, 4,000-kilometer journey? So that I like. They are raising money for it right now. They've raised about $500,000 for these truckers. The quote that I love, though, and I'm going to ask you guys about this, the quote that I love came from the spokesman for another convoy. So there are multiple trucker convoys that are going to try to meet up along the way, apparently. So we don't know how big this thing's going to be once they get there. But the head of one of the other convoys, Bob Bolus, told a Fox News TV station that it would be like, quote, a giant boa constrictor that basically squeezes you, chokes you, and it swallows you. That's what we're going to do to D.C.
Wow.
Oh, I love it.
Bob Bolus says. So
I love it.
Have we reached the point where D.C. needs to be encircled, crushed, and swallowed?
Well, I do think that the swamp still has plenty of draining to do, even with Trump leading.
It's a good place for boa constrictors.
Yeah.
Swamp.
Yes.
And so I think that I honestly am a little surprised that he would go out and say that, just because we've seen how the media has tried to twist a lot of what people who were at January 6th were doing. Obviously, we don't support people who went into the Capitol and whatever, take your pick on that. But just knowing how kind of crazy everything's gotten and how people have just been shoved into things, and Ashley Babbitt's death just going uncovered, it worries me a little bit, because we saw with Canada, with the Freedom Convoy there, that they kind of tried to turn it into their own January 6th. And I don't think that it would be surprising if they tried to do that again in the United States. So,
do you think they were turning it into their own version of January 6th, Joey? in Canada?
I don't think so. I mean, these guys were not. It's not like they rammed their trucks into the Parliament building in Canada or something. They were really mostly peaceful people. Actually, the police were the ones that were violent, with them.
Ones,
It was not the protesters. But I do have fears that this DC protest, the police, the National Guard may make this into a January 6th like event. That worries me. I think the Biden administration is calling in 700 National Guard troops in preparation for this. That worries me. The Capitol fence is going back up, but I also love that they're going to DC, and I love that they are trying to time it with the State of the Union, because that sends an unmistakable message. I mean, imagine if Biden can't get from the White House to the Capitol building because a bunch of truck drivers have shut down Washington, D.C. And they'll have to take him through some secret underground tunnel or something.
Helicopter,
they'll have to fly him in. Like, I love that. I mean, DC is a swamp. This is an unmistakable way to send a message. It's great, but I do worry how the government and the media will portray it.
Yeah.
So the BBC, confirming what you were saying, the BBC is reporting that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved a request from the DC government and the U.S. Capitol Police for 700 troops.
Right.
Around 25 separate convoys plan to converge and join forces on at the nation's capital to replicate recent protests in Canada. Some 50, quote, large tactical vehicles will be stationed 24 hours a day. The troops will not carry firearms or take part in law enforcement. So that at least is good.
That is good. I'm glad about that.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she was, quote, confident in the security plans to protect Washington around the time President Joe Biden gives his State of the Union speech. What I'm curious about, Joey, is, I mean, it's good, I suppose, that Pelosi's confident that their security will hold. My question is, should Pelosi and the government be in a position where they have to erect fences and roll out 50 large technical not assault vehicles, but large technical vehicles to protect them from the voters?
No,
I mean, doesn't that indicate a fundamental failure of government?
Yes, I think this is something you and I have discussed with January 6th as well. It's like, we're not condoning what happened, but also, what does it say about the government that this group of people felt the need to do this at the Capitol? And this is not an excuse for any of that, but it's a point. And so I think it's the same reason here. Like, why do they feel the need to fence 700 National Guard troops? Maybe do some looking in the mirror and say, where have we failed? Oh, maybe these mandates for truckers are problematic, and that's the reason that they're coming. Maybe we have failed as a government, but they're Democrats, and Democrats have shown a history of being incapable of looking inward at their own problems and failures in government.
Yeah, and the one thing that I'm thinking of, just because if you think of everyone going and they have the fences, it's two things optically for me. The first is that obviously they're going to be using these images of the truckers and stuff to be like, oh, look what Trump started. They're probably going to go back to that and look at Trump's wing of politics. But the other side of me is looking at that and going, that could actually obviously work really quickly against them, because it's what you were just saying. It's like people were obviously so fed up and so upset, but it's like, if it's supposedly this fringe radical whack group of people and it's not that many people and they want to paint this idea that Biden's not really doing that bad, why are you putting up the barricades? Why are you putting up the fences? It just doesn't make sense when you actually think about it in that way either.
Go ahead.
I was saying, what I would love when we're watching the State of the Union speech on Tuesday? We can just overhear the honks from
horns
outside the Capitol
but
building. Honk, honk.
Not honk, honk.
Yeah.
Because we know honk, honk is code for what?
Heil Hitler.
It's the stupidest thing possible.
Stupid.
The stupidest.
So
was it
stupid.
Trudeau
So
himself
dumb.
who advanced that?
I think it was a PM in Canada. Said
Didn't they get
One
that
of the
from a
liberal
literal
PMs.
Antifa document in Canada? I swear that's where
know.
that, because it was the PM
it to be
and
that
she
stupid,
cited
it
it,
probably
and it was like an
Yes.
anti, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there you go.
I would just love to
Like,
overhear.
seriously, honk honk means
Yes.
Heil Hitler.
Yes.
It's like they don't even, cars don't actually make it honk.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
They all make
They
different
a
noises.
horn
Maybe a
sound.
clown car.
Maybe a clown car.
What's funny is they're the authoritarian ones too in all of it.
The fascists are the ones called, and isn't that what fascists do?
Yes.
They
Yes.
call people who want freedom fascists.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
the first move in the fascist playbook. Call people who are not fascists fascists.
Yes.
That's how you do it. You said something interesting just a second ago, Joey, that piqued my interest. You said Democrats really should look in the mirror.
Yeah.
But they have this tendency to not be able to take the blame for anything they do.
Never.
The inverse of that is interesting, too, because we joke about how Republicans know how to lose so well.
Yeah.
They are unbelievably good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And that Republicans have the opposite problem. They look in the mirror and they take responsibility for problems that aren't theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
take the blame for things that Democrats do, that the left does, that is bad for the country. And they take the blame for it. They blame themselves, and then Democrats let them do that, and then they shellac them
Later.
in the polls.
Yeah.
Yes. So, all right, I told you we were going to go for a ride today. So we're talking about convoys. I want to shift gears slightly, no pun intended, to police brutality. And those two things go together because of what we saw in Canada. Now, the Western Journal, along with other publications, Fox and Fox News as well, we warned that what happened was going to happen. We said, look, they are setting up for this. They want to spark
Yes.
violence. Israel, I think we've got a couple of clips of some police violence in Canada. Let's roll those. So that's the loving hand of the state right there. George Orwell talked about the future being a boot stomping on the face of humanity for the rest of history. That looks like his boots fit quite well.
But they're not the fascists.
Yeah.
They're not the fascists,
Yes.
exactly. That's freedom.
Yeah.
Those are freedom kicks. So do we run the next one too? Do we have the next one?
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one in the background where you can see. He's hitting him with the rifle
Yeah.
butt, just beating
Wow.
the tar out of that person.
Wasn't there one? There was like an elderly grandmother that they beat too, and
Well-
she ended up
Or
in the
grandpa.
hospital.
So roll the next
Or
one.
grandfather, sorry.
Oh, grandfather,
one.
I don't know.
This
It's-
one.
It's
Yeah,
this.
this one.
It was
Yes.
an elderly woman with a
elderly
walker,
woman. That's
I
it.
believe,
Yep.
was reported to have been trampled or knocked over and trampled, something like that, by the horses. They just turned the horses
Wow.
into
Yes.
the crowd and literally trampled people.
I believe I saw later reports that this. Don't take me at my word. I just saw reports of this. That this was an indigenous woman as well. So,
And we know how
Yes.
Canadians feel about the
Oh,
indigenous
yes.
people.
Yes.
That's if you think race relations here are bad, folks.
Yeah.
So that's police brutality. I think everyone is concerned that whatever happens in D.C., it will degenerate into something like that or something far, far, far worse. The conversation we kept having, okay, there we go. I saw a giant horse over my face there for a minute. A flock of horses.
Oh, yeah, there, that's back.
Herd. Horses come in. Herd
Wow.
of horses.
Herd of
that's
horses.
a-
A
Herd
flock
of
of horses.
horses.
Flock of
Flock
flying
seagulls
horses.
and a
That
herd
could
of
easily
horses.
kill someone too.
Yes.
Anyway, but what we kept saying through all of this is that the reason Trudeau and his government kept talking about, oh, well, we're going to come in and we're going to take the children, or oh, we're going to come in and we're going to take your pets and we're going to take them to a pet center, and if you don't pick them up in a couple days, you know what pounds do. They put the dogs
Yep.
down. All of this was designed to elicit violence on the
Yes.
part of the protesters. And it failed miserably. The protesters did not get violent.
Right.
Wow.
But I guess unremarkably, maybe, the Canadian government did become violent and
Yes.
attack them. So here's what I want to know. Guys, Democrats, the left, liberals have been pounding on the table about police violence. Good gosh, police brutality. We've got to defund the police. They're just brutal. They're pigs. They want to throw everybody in jail. They're horrible people. And now all of a sudden, Man, the cops are great. Look at them restoring order in Canada. Aren't these guys fantastic? What happened?
What was the poll? What percentage
gosh.
of Democrats supports this?
Yeah, so
Of what's happening in
there we
Canada?
go.
It's
So-
alarming, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is Trafalgar polling, and it came out, let's see here, February 22nd, so that's yesterday, I think. So you want to be terrified, folks? Let me give you a couple stats. I'll give you the two good ones. 74% of independent voters disapprove of how Trudeau handled the trucker protest. All right, these are Americans, 74% of independents. 87% of Republican voters disapprove. So that craziness you just saw, run one of those again, Israel. Let's just throw it up on screen while I'm talking. So 74% and 83% of Republicans disapprove of this terror, this horribleness, this trampling over old ladies with walkers. Right. Let me share something scary with you folks. According to Trafalgar, the percentage of Dem voters who approve of the handling of this, 66%.
Wow.
66%, two-thirds of Democrats
It's horrible.
approve of the way Trudeau has handled this. And the way Trudeau handled it was what we just saw.
Yeah.
Well, it's just disgusting to me because first and foremost, you look at that and it's obviously a crowd, but it's like what I just said is that's people could get crushed, trampled, die. And we look back at history, and the left's least favorite subject on the planet is history, because if they paid attention, fascism usually results as people being silenced. And so they still think that they're on the right side because Justin Trudeau and his cronies go up and say that the people who are out there protesting are Nazis and all these things. And as we all know, a lot of the things that have occurred in history have been by people who claim to have just been following orders.
Yep.
And that's the result of just following orders.
Yeah. That's just super quick.
Yeah,
Jordan
go ahead,
Peterson makes that point. You know, one of the things you want to do is conduct yourself in such a way that if they ever turn the gas ovens back on, that you're saving Jews instead of helping run the trains on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people actually will try to run the trains. They will
They
not
won't,
try to
because they
save
don't want to
them.
have
Yes.
to deal with the personal
Yep.
disruption in
Yep.
their life. They're like,
Yes.
well, that's
Yep.
not me on the train, so it doesn't really
Do
matter.
not for a second think that the majority of people will magically side against the government and on the side of freedom,
No.
even when something as horrible as the Holocaust is
No.
going. Because, folks, it didn't happen. It didn't happen in Germany.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. People like Schindler were very rare. So anyway, just to your point on that. Now, where were you going?
Well, so I actually think it's a good chance to talk about something maybe that conservatives don't talk about as much as we should. You know,
How great killing Nazis is?
well,
'Cause it
yes, that
good.
is great. Yes, fully support.
Yeah.
So, but we saw
In
these,
the World War II, don't
Yes,
go out and shoot
yes,
Nazis.
yes.
That's as much as they might deserve it. Don't do it.
So in those videos, we saw the horrifying things that police were
Yeah.
doing to these protesters. And I think it's important to remember, conservatives, we generally support the police, but we can't blindly support them because we have to remember at the end of the day,
Right.
these people are street level bureaucrats from the government. And so you have to remember who's in charge of these people. So like when we're talking about what's going to happen in DC, we have National Guard that has been called in by the Biden administration. We have Capitol Police, which are run by leftists.
Yeah.
And we have, the people, the actual security at the Capitol. Remember, one of those police officers killed Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed Trump supporter. So I think it's just important that as conservatives, we remember that, yes, we like the police, but be careful, remember who's in charge, because it can quickly turn into what we just saw.
Yeah,
I think it's just important to think about.
Yeah, it absolutely can. So much of it, that's the terrifying thing about red, blue America, right? So much of it depends on where the officers are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's in charge?
Yeah, you hear, well, certainly chiefs of police and sometimes sheriffs in super populated counties really give the Democrat or the leftist line. When you run into sheriffs and chiefs and officers in rural areas, you almost always, they are conservative. Not always, but almost always. And that's great. That's good for red America. It's terrifying for blue America because that means if it ever hits the fan, blue Americans can't count on law enforcement
Yeah.
to actually stay on their side. And part of the idea, people are against the sort of militarization of the police departments. I'm not actually against that, I don't think, because at the end of the day, if the country itself turns on its people, I think most of the time the police departments will side with the people. And
Yeah,
so you
I think
actually
so.
want them
Yeah.
armed. But anyway, we're going sort of far afield here. But let me get, so we gave you those stats. What was it? 65.4% of Democrats approve of how Trudeau handled things. You saw how he handled things. So they seem to be totally okay with police violence. By the way, 17% of Democrat voters didn't know what was going on. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
So let me take us back quickly here to July 1st, 2020. This is a story, I'm pulling this from a story by the AP in Detroit. For the first time, polls show significant changes in how white Democrats view police brutality and the consequences. 64% now describe police violence against the public as very or extremely serious, compared with 29% in July of 2015. So now let's go down. 86% of white Democrats say the justice system is too lenient with officers, up from 46%. Black Democrats are even more likely than they were in 2015 to say that, 87 versus 71. So just a couple of years ago, man, the police were the enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh. They're all
Yes.
now all of a sudden, again, supporting Trudeau, supporting what the state is doing, trying to crush. Again, peaceful protesters. Use the babysitter test on this. Would you rather people in the Canada trucker convoy babysit your kid? Or would you rather people at a BLM riot babysit your kid? You would rather
That's
people
a
at the trucker
scary
convoy.
thought.
Yeah.
But Dems seem to be fine with bashing their faces in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a terrifying thing. If you have a friend who says, gosh, I just don't think there's any difference between leftists and conservatives or Democrats and Republicans, you might remind them of this. It's a chilling thought. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's just a classic case of when you're a Democrat, the rules don't apply to your situation. So, if it benefits us, the rules don't apply. You know, if it squashes counter protests, the rules don't apply. We're fine with it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Police brutality. That's what we've been talking about. Now, we're going to shift gears just a little bit again. We started off talking about the Freedom Convoy, then we started talking about police brutality. Now, I want to shift, and we can tie this all together before all said and done. I want to shift to Ukraine for just a minute. I'm going to pull from a Newsweek article now. President Joe Biden's administration has called Russian troops entering Ukraine an invasion, quote, an invasion, for the first time on Tuesday morning after members of Congress from both parties used the term and called for tough sanctions. We think this is, yes, the beginning of an invasion, Russia's latest invasion into the Ukraine. Representative Jim Himes, a Democrat representing Connecticut's 4th Congressional District, tweeted Tuesday, if you know the history of aggressive dictators, you know it's critical not to lose clarity. Putin is invading Ukraine, full stop. Representative David Price from North Carolina said Putin is trying to pull the wool over the world's eyes, but the truth is plain. He's lying to justify an invasion. Bob Menendez, the notorious Bob Menendez from New Jersey, called Putin's actions an act of unprovoked aggression and a brazen violation of international law. So what's interesting here to me is that the Democrats are they are super against invasions.
Yeah.
Super against
Yes.
invasions.
Oh, yes.
These are really dangerous things. The only problem with this, guys, is that last year about 2 million illegals crossed over the southern border.
Yep.
Yes.
2 million. Would anybody like to know how large Russia's standing army is?
2 million?
1 million.
Oh!
Oh, wow.
With 2 million in reserve. So twice as many illegals as the standing Russian army crossed over the southern border last year. And the Democrats refused to call it an invasion. Yet they're focused on the other side of the planet, almost on the other side of the planet, in Putin's backyard, which is none of our business. I'm pro-democracy. I hate that this is happening to Ukraine, but it's none of our business.
No.
Yeah.
So what explains the double standard, Joey? Why is an invasion there bad, but an invasion here just terrific.
Well, Joe Biden is one of the biggest globalists of history. Joe Biden is a globalist. Also, I believe Joe Biden has a vested interest in Ukraine, considering Hunter Biden's sketchy business dealings with his, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month salary from the Ukrainian gas company. By the way, he's under federal investigation right now for tax dealings. So I think Joe Biden has a vested interest. I also think it's really easy for Biden to attach himself to the Ukraine-Russia situation and then use that to put blame on for problems happening in the United States. It's really convenient to say, oh, inflation, gas prices, energy, all these problems are because of what's happening thousands of miles away. So that's easy. And it is politically hurtful to recognize the invasion on the southern border. Joe Biden would have to admit that his administration has failed. But with Ukraine, Russia, he can look like he's coming to the rescue and he's the savior. And all these problems are because of something happening thousands of miles away, not because of what I've done domestically.
So, Tara, why then don't they care about the southern border? What makes it different?
Optics.
Oh,
yeah.
It's completely that. Like, if they can point to the southern border and point to the fact that women and children are trying to get over and all this stuff, rather than like 99% of them being sex trafficked in reality with coyotes and all of that, that's what they're gonna point to. Plus, that we all know that they're going to try and push what Obama has been pushing for years, which is getting all of these people legalized. We know that many people typically vote Democrat based from all of this, just because the Democrats are constantly pushing.
That's the hope for sure for the Dems.
That's basically what they're pushing, and at least with Ukraine, they can be like, oh, look, we're defending democracy and all of these things. And it's just frustrating to me and mind-boggling to me that we're risking sending over American lives for a country the size of Maine when we're not even defending our own border. And if we're gonna get into the whole government spiel on everything and say, hey, Russia needs to take responsibility for their actions, what's Mexico doing about the border situation? That's their people, whether or not the Mexican government is pushing it for them to come over. They're freely allowing it. So it's just ridiculous.
What?
Well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
The Mexican government, they are doing something about it. They will not allow us to cross over without documents. Let me tell you, that is highly illegal in Mexico. Highly illegal. Go ahead.
Why don't we sanction Mexico?
Yeah.
Why don't we sanction them? Why don't we say, we're gonna place all these sanctions on you. We're gonna close down the border until you figure it out. That's what we're doing to Russia. I mean, it's so frustrating. And it is literally an invasion on the southern border by millions of people. And the thing is it's not just people from Mexico. People coming from the Middle East and across the southern border.
Oh yeah, starting from Brazil, working their way up. It's crazy.
So frustrating.
So the theme to me seems to be then that the left is okay with violence directed against freedom fighters.
Yes.
It is okay supporting violence. Like, we haven't deployed troops. I don't think we're going to in Ukraine. Biden's not that stupid. Well, I don't know. Just wait.
In
maybe
the words
it
of
might
Barack
happen. But they're not willing to. They're willing to defend a border on the other side of the world, but they're not willing to defend our southern border. When a group twice as large as the entire standing Russian army has crossed over in a year.
Yeah.
In a year. It's outrageous. So, Joey, you are right, and CNN knows it too. CNN is
really?
worried. Yeah. We'll wrap up here in just a second, folks, but I do want to get to this one article. So CNN's Stephen Collinson, wrote a piece called "Why a Russian Invasion of Ukraine Would Hurt Americans Too." And so I looked down at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I finally got to the first thing that would hurt us. 10 graphs in. There's a lot of throat
Classic
clearing there.
CNN.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the first thing, a Russian invasion of Ukraine would crush democratic principles and the idea that people can choose their leaders for themselves. Principles on which the United States has built decades of foreign policy. Well, where was CNN when we were actually trying to do that in the Middle East? CNN was trying to undercut us every which way they could.
Yeah.
That's just because George Bush was behind it. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I just am baffled by that. It's just,
All right. So next up, a Russian invasion could have significant domestic blowback inside the U.S. in a way that would impose more economic pain, and ultimately, here it is. CNN's worried, hurt the prospects of Biden and his Democrats.
Yep. There you go.
Now, by the way, this was actually written a while back before things began heating up. So they've been worried about this. For the first time in 30 years, the United States and Russia, the two countries with the biggest nuclear arsenals, would be locked in a direct standoff. No, we're not. It could also cause oil prices to shoot up and translate into direct pain at the pump. Well, that actually wouldn't be an issue if we were still energy independent, but we're not anymore. And then they go to the worst possible thing for them, contemplating a second Trump presidency. Now, this was back. A second Trump presidency would raise real questions about the future of NATO that would again play into Putin's goal of dividing or even destroying the alliance. The New York Times reported, for instance, in 2019, that Trump had privately spoken about withdrawing from the organization that he frequently criticized. That's
good.
And so the media, that's the serious. The media is terrified of this because I don't think they think there's a way for Biden to win. He can't deploy troops. If he says don't do it and Putin does it, then he looks weak. If he acquiesces, he looks weak. I think they're absolutely terrified of Ukraine.
Yeah.
There's no way Biden comes out.
There's no way you look good.
No, what's
this.
the
There's no winning strategy for him.
Legit, and we'll wrap the show up on this, but legit question, politics out of it, political parties out of it, ideologies out of it. How can Biden handle this in a way that makes him look good? Is there any way?
I think that my standard for that, when it comes to foreign policy, is not intervening unless absolutely necessary, because America has truly become the world's babysitter, and America's job is not to play world cop. And so unless something happens to where it's an absolute dire humanitarian crisis, then I'm kind of probably more for going in. But I think in my opinion, the only way for him to come out looking clean is like withholding entry until the absolute moment of necessity.
Do you think not going in makes him look good, or does it just not make him look bad?
I just think it's kind of like what you just said. It's like a double-edged sword, and I think if they went to through the narrative and just explained, this is not our country. And if they're going to go for their excuses, they can talk about COVID, they can talk about all their stuff, the recovery, all the huge employment issues. Like, there's a lot of significant issues that are going on in America right now. Like, we just spent 30 minutes talking about the trucker convoy. Like, there's serious things that we should be focusing on as a country, and we really shouldn't be focusing on a tiny little country next to Russia. And I just think that is the line that they should toe, because I think any other line of trying to play hardball with Putin just won't go well in Biden's favor, because I just genuinely don't think that Biden has the ability, like cognitively or otherwise, to really do that effectively. And I'm not trying to knock a man while he's down, because he clearly seems to be having some like elderly issues that are come on, as you get into your older age. But it's just the reality of the situation, and I just don't think it would be smart.
Can he come out looking good at all? Is there any way?
If I was Biden, I would hold a presidential address to the nation, and I would explain that Putin is a tyrant, and so is the leader of Ukraine. They are both tyrants. They are fighting with each other, and it's none of our business, and we're going to stay out of it. And I would say to the country, today, we're going to suspend the mask mandate on the airplanes. We're going to reopen oil and gas drilling. We're going to start reconstruction of the Keystone Pipeline. I'm going to send the military to the southern border to secure it. We're going to start reconstruction of the wall, and we're going to focus on the American people, because we have a republic here that needs saving and protected. And
nice,
here
Joey.
that needs saving and protected.
Republic.
And we have nothing.
We have
nothing to gain by helping two tyrants thousands of miles away. That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's good. So there it is. There it is. The thread, I think, running through all of this is that you've got truckers, salt of the earth, blue-collar folks who are trying their best to stand up for freedom. The Democrat Party seems to be, and Democrat voters seem to be perfectly fine with those people being brutalized.
Yep.
They're thrilled that the fence is going back up around the Capitol. They're glad that tactical vehicles will be out there. They're glad that they've asked for guardsmen out there. They don't want to see protests for freedom here. However, protests for freedom in Ukraine, they're incredibly sympathetic to. They want to keep that border from being overrun, and they are feckless and have no desire whatsoever to protect our southern border.
Yeah.
Guys, there's based on that description, I don't know how in the world you could call any of the people on the left who support these things pro-American at all.
No,
they're
not.
No,
They're not.
They're
not anymore.
anti-American.
Yes.
They're anti-freedom. Well, they're actually kind of almost okay with freedom as long as it's not in America. That's the weird thing about this. Yes, freedom in Ukraine.
Democracy build
freedom
overseas.
Borders in Ukraine,
Yes.
inviolable.
Yes.
But here, no freedom. Beat the crap out of truckers. Pardon me. Let an invasion 2 million strong in 1 year come over the border. That is what the Democrat Party is about.
Yes.
So if you want to know how all three of those things connect, there you go. All right, that's it for us. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. We appreciate it. Remember, we're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Rumble, hope you're watching on Rumble instead of YouTube. It's better. YouTube's run by a bunch of jerks. But if you're watching on either, click the subscribe button. After you click that, a little bell will pop up. Click that bell. That's going to make sure you get notified every time we go live. Also, if you would like to support us and our journalism directly, we would be thrilled to have your support. We are not owned by billionaires. We don't have a billionaire backer. We're just a small family-run business. And you can support us directly by going to westernjournal.com/join. westernjournal.com/join. There are several ways there that you can partner with us to get the truth out and defend Christianity, the faith, and truth, justice, and the American way, dare I say it. All right, that's it for us. We will see you guys back here on Friday at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. Till then, have a great rest of your week.